I had lived behind the same blue front door for 43 years, long enough to believe the house knew me better than most people did. It had heard me laugh before Daniel was born, heard me cry when money was short, and held the silence that followed Robert's death 2 years earlier. To anyone else, it was an aging two-story house with loose porch boards and roses. To me, it was where I carried my newborn son through a snowstorm, where Robert measured Daniel's height against the kitchen wall, and where family photographs seemed to preserve us untouched by time. Robert and I had paid for it slowly. We skipped vacations, wore old coats, and postponed long-promised retirement luxuries. When the final mortgage payment cleared, Robert opened champagne in his workshop and said, "Now nobody can take this place from us." After he died, Daniel began visiting more often. At first, I felt grateful. He checked the furnace, collected my prescriptions, and offered to manage my bills online. I called it devotion. I did not notice how quickly help became permission. Bank statements stopped arriving. Papers appeared beneath my hand before I had time to read them. Daniel asked repeatedly where Robert had kept the deed. He spoke about assisted living with the patience people use when correcting a child. "You shouldn't be alone in a house this large," he would say. I always defended him when Ruth raised concerns. Daniel was my only son. I remembered the little boy who once clung to my skirt during thunderstorms, not the man who studied my home as if it were an asset waiting to be released. I mistook supervision for love because betrayal rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives carrying groceries, smiling gently, and asking where you keep your signature. The morning my key stopped working, I was carrying 2 bags of groceries and white carnations for Robert's photograph. My doctor had told me my blood pressure was improving. I remember feeling almost proud as I climbed the porch steps, unaware that my life had already been packed into cardboard. The key entered the lock but would not turn. I tried again, then wiped it against my sleeve as though a little dust could explain everything. That was when I noticed the boxes beside the garage. One held my sweaters. Another contained my medication, 3 family albums, and Robert's old brown winter coat. I dropped the carnations. "Daniel," I called. The door opened 6 inches and stopped against the security chain. My son stood inside my hallway, beneath the clock Robert had repaired every winter. He did not look surprised to see me. "You can't stay here anymore, Mom." For a moment, the sentence made no sense. I asked whether there had been a gas leak, a break-in, some danger I had failed to understand. Daniel sighed. "The house belongs to me now. You signed it over months ago." I remembered signing insurance forms and documents for roof repairs. I remembered Daniel covering lines with his hand and saying legal language would only confuse me. I did not remember giving away my home. "Show me the papers." "Not while you're upset." He said he had arranged temporary accommodation and that I had become forgetful, careless, unsafe. When I raised my voice, he lowered his. "Please don't create a scene. The neighbors already know you've been struggling. This will only prove my point." Across the street, Mrs. Bell's curtain shifted. Inside, Daniel stood surrounded by my furniture, my photographs, my husband's tools, and the smell of the soup I had made the night before. Outside, I stood beside boxes of clothing like an unwanted tenant. I reached toward the chain. "This is my home." He stepped back. "No, Mom," he said softly. "It was your home." Then he closed the door, and the lock clicked with the certainty of a verdict. Daniel returned later through the garage, carrying my small red suitcase and a cream envelope. His tender voice made the cruelty worse. "I found a safe place for you," he said. Inside the envelope was the address of an assisted living facility across town. I recognized the understaffed facility, notorious for cramped rooms. "I need Robert's photographs," I said, "and the legal folder from the study." "We'll deliver what you need later." "I need them now." Daniel smiled as if patience were costing him. He explained that renovations would begin soon and that selling the house quickly was best for everyone. That was when I understood this was not temporary. He was not protecting me from danger. He was removing me before I could resist. Memories rearranged themselves with frightening clarity. Daniel correcting me during medical appointments, telling relatives I repeated myself, taking control of my online banking, and sliding forms across the table while keeping the pages turned away. Still, guilt rose before anger. He was my only child. Mothers are trained by love to search for excuses long after the truth becomes obvious. I remembered Daniel at 6, feverish and terrified, gripping my hand in the hospital while I promised I would never leave him. I had sold my grandmother's bracelet to pay what insurance would not cover. Now that frightened boy was using my age like a weapon, turning every hesitation into evidence against me. Daniel, please listen. His expression hardened. You need to accept what's happening. I was still speaking when he went inside. The door closed between us, gentle and final. For 43 years, I had taught my son that home meant safety. In less than an hour, he taught me that safety could be stolen by someone who knew exactly where you kept the keys. I called 3 relatives but could not say I had nowhere to sleep. Each time someone answered, shame tightened my throat. I invented poor reception, promised to call back, and hung up quietly. Ruth came immediately, without asking questions. She loaded my boxes into her bakery van and drove me to the small guest room above her shop. The warm room smelled of cinnamon and yeast, but I shivered all night. Lying beneath a borrowed quilt, I began Daniel's work for him. I questioned every memory. Had I signed away the house without understanding? Had my memory weakened so gradually that everyone noticed except me? Was I truly unsafe alone? At midnight, Ruth entered with tea and found me reviewing my recent mistakes. Did Daniel show you the deed? She asked. No. Then stopped treating his accusation like proof. Her words gave me enough strength to open the boxes. I searched for my legal folder, Robert's will, our marriage certificate, and the financial records I kept in the study. None of them were there. What Daniel had returned was not random. He had given me clothing, medicine, and sentimental objects, the things an old woman might need to disappear quietly. He had kept anything that could help her fight. At the bottom of one box, beneath 2 blankets, I found Robert's winter coat. It was brown, heavy and worn smooth at the elbows. I pressed it to my face and caught the faintest trace of cedar from his workshop. Months before he died, I had suggested donating it. Never throw that coat away, Maggie, he had said sharply. I thought grief had made him sentimental. Now, in Ruth's guest room, the memory felt different. Not affectionate. Urgent. I ran my fingers along the lining and felt something hard beneath the fabric. The stitching was nearly perfect, but I recognized Robert's clumsy hand. Along the inner seam, the thread changed from brown to black. Ruth brought scissors, and I cut carefully. A small brass key fell onto the bed. Behind it was a folded note bearing my name. Maggie, if you ever feel unsafe in your own home, take this key to First County Bank. Ask for box 317. Go alone or with someone you trust. Do not tell Daniel. Robert's handwriting tilted downward the way it had near the end, when illness weakened his fingers. I read the note slowly 3 times. Relief came first. He had left something for me, then fear replaced it. Robert had not written if you lose the deed or if there is an emergency. He had written unsafe in your own home, and he had named our son. Anger followed. If Robert had suspected Daniel, why had he left me unprepared? Why had he hidden warnings inside coats instead of speaking to his wife? Ruth sat beside me. We'll go when the bank opens. I nearly refused. Opening that box would mean admitting the family I had defended might never have been as loyal as I believed. There are truths people avoid not because they are weak, but because lies have become part of the roof holding their lives together. Yet Daniel had already torn off that roof. By dawn, the bakery ovens were humming below us. I washed my face, borrowed Ruth's gray coat, and placed the brass key in my purse. The night before, I had arrived believing I was helpless, old, and homeless. That morning, I no longer wanted comfort. I wanted evidence. And for the first time since Daniel closed my door, fear was no longer the strongest thing inside me. First County Bank occupied a stone building Robert trusted more than computers. Ruth waited for my nod before following me inside. The manager, Mr. Alden, recognized Robert's name immediately. He was careful about everything, he said with ordinary respect. After Daniel's condescension, ordinary respect felt luxurious. Mr. Alden checked my identification and explained that Robert had registered the box jointly. I had always possessed independent access. No permission from my son was needed. Box 317 was longer than expected and unexpectedly heavy. Inside lay a certified copy of our original property deed, several bank records, a small digital storage device, copies of documents bearing Daniel's signature, and a sealed letter addressed to me. I opened the certified deed first. The property had remained jointly owned by Robert and me. Upon his death, his share transferred directly to me. No clause or legitimate transfer gave Daniel legal ownership. My hands immediately began trembling. Daniel had shown me papers months earlier, calling them insurance authorizations and repair approvals. Either my signature had been obtained through deception, or someone had forged it after studying the way I wrote my name. Ruth touched my shoulder. You were right. I wanted those words to comfort me. Instead, they hurt. Being right meant my son had planned this. A note attached to the digital device explained that it contained scanned records and audio files Robert had collected during the final year of his life. Beside it were loan statements, payment demands, and copies of messages Daniel had apparently believed were destroyed. I reached for my phone. I wanted to call him, tell him I had the deed, demand that he unlock my door before the whole town learned what he had done. Ruth gently covered the screen with her hand. Read Robert's letter first. The envelope had yellowed slightly at the edges. My name was written across the front in the same unsteady handwriting as the note inside the coat. I had come looking for proof that the house was mine. As I broke the seal, I realized Robert had left proof of something far worse. My dearest Maggie, it began, if you are reading this, I failed to stop what I feared. His voice lived in every line. Daniel's business troubles were not temporary, Robert wrote. Our son had accumulated enormous debts through failed investments and gambling. He owed friends, private lenders, and dangerous people. Daniel had repeatedly asked Robert to use the house as collateral. When Robert refused, Daniel accused him of caring more about property than family. Later, he threatened to portray Robert as confused and financially incompetent. I pressed the page against the table. Daniel had prepared my accusation for his father first. Robert recorded conversations and copied documents, fearing Daniel would wait until his death, when grief made me easier to influence. Then came words that wounded like Daniel's betrayal. I did not tell you because you always defended him. I feared the truth would break you. I kept hoping he would change. Robert apologized for confusing silence with protection. He wrote that love without truth could become a locked room, keeping danger inside while convincing everyone they were safe. He predicted Daniel might isolate me, take control of my accounts, secure signatures I did not understand, or question my mental competence. He instructed me to contact Alina Brooks, an attorney whose card was taped beneath the letter. I felt betrayed twice, first by the son who had deceived me, then by the husband who had known enough to fear him but not enough to warn me. Yet Robert's secrecy had also produced the evidence now resting beneath my hands. His failure to trust me with the truth might be the reason I could survive it. The final lines blurred through my tears. Maggie, they may mistake your kindness for weakness because kind people rarely advertise their strength. Do not make that mistake about yourself. You carried this family through every hardship we ever faced. You are stronger than either of us allowed you to believe. I folded the letter carefully. For the first time, I understood that Robert had not left me a rescue. He had left me permission to fight. Even with the deed before me, my first instinct was to protect Daniel. I imagined charges destroying his marriage, career, and bond with my 17-year-old granddaughter, Sophie, and following him for many years. My voice offered excuses before anyone accused him. Ruth asked, "Did Daniel worry about destroying your life when he put your medicine in a box and locked you outside?" The question silenced me. Love did not require surrendering my dignity, nor motherhood becoming the cost of Daniel's mistakes. I called Alina Brooks. She arrived, examined Robert's evidence, and grew more serious with every page. "This involves possible fraud, coercion, and elder abuse," she said. "Do not confront or warn Daniel." We froze my accounts and prepared to challenge the transfer. I did not call Daniel or beg for my bed, family photographs, or my own home. Let him believe I was frightened. Let him imagine age had made me easy to remove. While he celebrated my silence, I would learn exactly how far his plan reached. Near noon, Alina paused over one document. "This signature is Daniel," she said. Below the false transfer was the name of a witness, someone close to me, someone who had sat at my table and called me family. Daniel had not acted alone. I entered the bank hopping to prove the house belonged to me. I left carrying something more dangerous, proof that my son had planned my betrayal for months and that another person I trusted had helped him do it. The second signature belonged to Vanessa. I stared at my daughter-in-law's name until the letters stopped looking familiar. She had signed as a witness, confirming that I understood the transfer and had given my home to Daniel willingly. Vanessa had eaten at my table and called me Mom when she wanted something. Now her handwriting helped turn me into an old woman who could be removed. Alina placed another document beside it. A private care consultant claimed I showed severe cognitive decline, poor judgment, and an inability to manage money safely. "I've never met this person," I said. "That may be the point," Alina replied. The letter had been shown to banks, relatives, and anyone Daniel needed to persuade. Publicly, he was the devoted son making painful decisions for his helpless mother. Privately, he had manufactured the helplessness first. Alina listed the possibilities: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, coercive control. Each phrase sounded colder than betrayal, but together they described it more accurately. What hurt most was not one false signature. It was the story built around my age. Every forgotten appointment, misplaced key, or repeated sentence could now be used as evidence that I no longer belonged to myself. Alina arranged an independent medical evaluation for the next morning. "They tried to make your mind the issue," she said, "so we document the truth." For the first time, I understood that proving I own the house would not be enough. I also had to prove I own my voice. Daniel moved faster than I expected. By afternoon, relatives began calling. Aunt June spoke slowly, as though kindness required smaller words. My cousin asked whether I remembered leaving home voluntarily after an argument. Someone else suggested I should accept help with grace. Then Ruth showed me Daniel's social media post. "Our family is dealing with a painful situation involving Mom's increasing confusion. Please respect our privacy while we make decisions for her safety." He did not accuse me directly. He did something more effective. He sounded calm. His careful concern made any anger from me look like proof. He had written the ending before I was allowed to tell the beginning. I wanted to post the deed, the false assessment, and Robert's letter. I wanted every relative to know what their devoted Daniel had done. Alina stopped me. "We file first," she said. "Silence is not surrender when it protects your case." So I said nothing. For most of my life, silence had meant swallowing pain to keep peace. Now it became strategy. Meanwhile, Daniel scheduled contractors and arranged a private sale. Alina discovered the proposed buyer was connected to one of his creditors. The price was far below market value, suggesting Daniel intended to exchange my home for time. If the sale closed, recovering the property could become harder, even with evidence. The clock was no longer measuring my patience. It was measuring how quickly my son could erase me. and he had already found people willing to help. Sophie arrived at Ruth's bakery after closing, wearing her school uniform beneath an oversized coat. The moment she saw me, she ran into my arms. "Grandma, Dad said you left." I held her face between my hands. He changed the locks. The color drained from her cheeks. Upstairs, Sophie told us Daniel and Vanessa had been fighting about money for months. She had heard her father say the house was their only way out. One night, she saw Vanessa place an old birthday card beside a legal form and practice my signature on scrap paper. Sophie began crying. "I should have told you." "You are 17, I said. "Their choices are not your burden." Alina asked whether she had saved anything. Sophie unlocked her phone. There were screenshots of messages, voice recordings captured during arguments, and a photograph showing the birthday card beside repeated versions of my name. She looked terrified. Helping me meant exposing her parents. Staying silent meant helping them hurt me. I refused to ask her to testify. "I will not use your love the way they did," I told her. Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then she sent the files to Alina herself. Daniel had treated everyone as pieces to move. Sophie chose truth, even though it cost her the safety of believing her parents were good. In a family damaged by adults, integrity had survived in its youngest heart. Watching her, I felt grief and pride occupy the same breath inside me together. Alina filed for an emergency order the next morning. 2 days later, I entered a courtroom carrying Robert's evidence and wearing the blue suit Daniel once said made me look surprisingly sharp for my age. Daniel sat across from me with an attorney. He described himself as a worried son forced to act. According to him, I had left the stove burning, forgotten medication, become lost near my own street, and signed the property transfer during a lucid conversation. Some incidents were exaggerated, others had never happened. My independent evaluation told a different story. The physician found me mentally competent, able to understand my assets, and fully capable of making legal decisions. The certified deed contradicted Daniel's ownership claim. Robert's records exposed his debts. Sophie's photograph connected Vanessa to the copied signature. Daniel's attorney argued that Robert had been paranoid and controlling. Alina answered by playing one of Robert's recordings. Daniel's voice filled the courtroom, pressuring his father to mortgage the house and warning that people might begin questioning Robert's judgment if he refused. The silence afterward felt heavier than any accusation. The judge froze the transfer, blocked the sale, and ordered Daniel not to remove, sell, or damage anything. I was granted access to my home. It was a victory, yet I did not feel triumphant. That house now contained the place Daniel had stood while denying me entry. Its rooms held evidence of how easily love could be repackaged as ownership. Did returning mean walking back into betrayal? Or did staying away allow Daniel to steal not only the building, but every memory inside it? When the judge asked whether I understood the order, I said yes. What I did not yet understand was whether reclaiming my house would heal me or trap me inside what happened there. I returned with Alina, Ruth, and a court officer. Daniel and Vanessa had been ordered to leave before we arrived. The replacement key turned easily. That broke me. Boxes crowded the hallway. My tea service was gone. So were 2 paintings, Robert's watch collection, and the cabinet my father built. In the kitchen, contractors had marked walls for removal. Robert's workshop hurt most. His tools had vanished, his workbench was dismantled, and paint samples covered the wall where he once hung Daniel's drawings. They had cleared his life to make room for an imagined buyer. Near the back door, I found a black trash bag filled with family photographs. Our wedding portrait was bent across Robert's face. Daniel had not merely planned to sell the house. He had begun editing us out of it. I searched Robert's desk, still untouched. Behind the lowest drawer was another envelope. Daniel's name was written across it. Inside, Robert had left a note for me. "Give this to our son only when he can no longer deny what his greed has done. Not when he is frightened. Not when he is angry. when he is ready to face himself. I held the envelope for a long time. Daniel had taken my home, my reputation, and my right to make decisions. Now I possessed words from the father whose approval he had chased all his life. The question was no longer whether Daniel deserved the letter. It was whether he was capable of hearing it. Daniel confronted me outside Ruth's bakery after the hearing. He looked smaller without my doorway behind him. "You're destroying everything," he said. His anger cracked quickly into desperation. He explained that investments had failed, business partners had cheated him, and Vanessa had spent money they did not have. Robert, he said, could have prevented everything by helping. I could still prevent it by selling a house too large for one old woman. Each sentence moved responsibility farther from him. For most of his life, I had rushed to soften every consequence. When he failed an exam, I blamed the teacher. When his first business collapsed, I called it bad luck. When Robert criticized him, I stood between them. This time, I let the silence remain. "Hardship did not forge my signature," I said. "Debt did not tell relatives I was confused. Fear did not put my medicine outside and lock the door." He looked away. Then he used Sophie. "If you pursue charges, she'll suffer. Is that what you want for your granddaughter?" "You risked her home, her trust, and her future," I replied. "Do not place your choices in her hands now." Daniel believed strength meant controlling the story, the money, and the consequences. I was learning that strength meant standing still while consequences arrived. His voice lowered. "Mom, please." I reached into my bag and removed Robert's envelope. "Your father left this for you." Daniel stared at his name. I did not tell him it contained forgiveness, because it did not. I did not promise that reading it would save him, because some truths only open the door. The person receiving them must decide whether to walk through. He took the envelope with shaking hands. "For once," I said, "read every word before you decide what it means." Daniel opened Robert's letter at a table. I watched his eyes move across the page. Robert wrote that he knew about the debts and did not believe his son was beyond redemption. Then he drew a line Daniel had spent years erasing. "Losing money is failure," he wrote. "Sacrificing another person to hide that failure is betrayal." He reminded Daniel of the surgery he needed at 6, when I sold my grandmother's bracelet to cover the bills. Robert wrote that my love had saved him more than once, but one day he might mistake that love for weakness and try to spend it like money. The letter offered no loan, rescue, or forgiveness. It offered one final chance to tell the truth before greed destroyed what debt had not. Daniel covered his face and began to cry. Once, that sound would have pulled me toward him. I would have touched his shoulder and promised everything could be repaired. I stayed where I was. Tears can mean remorse, fear, shame, or self-pity. I could not know which ones he carried. His breakdown was not redemption. It was only the first moment, when he could no longer pretend he was the victim. I continued with the civil case and cooperated with the investigation. Alina warned me that anger could tempt people to improve the truth, to add details, sharpen injuries, or make motives sound darker than the evidence showed. I refused. Daniel and Vanessa had done enough. I did not need to become dishonest to prove their dishonesty. Faced with Robert's records, Sophie's files, and the forged assessment, they admitted the transfer documents were fraudulent. The court voided the transaction and restored complete control of the property and accounts to me. Daniel was ordered to repay money taken from my savings and faced legal consequences for the forgery. Vanessa separated from him and claimed she had acted under pressure. Sophie's photograph and messages showed otherwise. Daniel asked me to withdraw my statements. I said no. He asked me to pay the debts before they ruined him. I said no again. But I did not prevent Sophie from seeing her parents. Their wrongdoing did not give me the right to control her love. I established conditions for any future contact with Daniel. No access to my money, no role in my medical or legal decisions, no private meetings designed to pressure me, and no reconciliation without sustained accountability. He called those conditions punishment. They are boundaries, I told him. Punishment is what the law decides. Revenge would have meant making Daniel suffer, because suffering satisfied me. Justice meant stopping him from hurting me again, telling the truth, and allowing consequences to belong to the people who created them. For years, I had confused mercy with rescue. Now I understood mercy could coexist with a locked door and an honest record. I had lost the family I thought I possessed. But I had recovered something more essential, the right to protect myself without becoming cruel. I kept the house, but I refused to let it become a museum of betrayal. With Ruth's help, I renovated the upstairs rooms into affordable housing for older women facing eviction, financial abuse, or families who had decided age made them disposable. The first resident, Lillian, arrived carrying 2 suitcases and apologized repeatedly for needing help. I recognized the shame in her voice. "You are not a burden," I told her, hearing the words return to me. Sophie visited every weekend. She organized digital records, planted herbs beside the porch, and taught me how to use security alerts without treating me like a child. Elena helped me update my will, medical directives, and financial safeguards. No single relative would ever again control my accounts or speak for me without oversight. I placed Robert's letters in a secure folder. They were no longer warnings hidden in darkness. They were reminders that truth delayed could still become protection. Daniel began financial counseling and sent handwritten apologies. He did not ask me to erase the case or rescue him from debt. That mattered. I acknowledged his effort, but I did not call effort repair. Remorse was a door he had finally approached. Trust was the long road beyond it, and I would decide how far he traveled before I opened anything. This time, I would keep the key. I stood at the front door, holding the key that once failed to turn. Inside, Ruth was laughing with Lillian. Sophie was setting the table. Upstairs, another woman unpacked without apology. The house no longer whispered about loss. It spoke through laughter, footsteps, and doors opened without fear. Being locked out was not the worst betrayal. The greater danger was making me believe age, motherhood, and love required powerlessness. Robert's letter did not rescue me. Paper cannot confront a son or rebuild a life. It reminded me I could do those things myself. Daniel tried to turn my home into the price of his survival. I turned it into shelter for people who had been told they were expendable. I still loved my son. Perhaps one day forgiveness would grow where trust had died, but forgiveness could come slowly. Dignity did not need to wait. I placed the key in the lock, opened the door, and walked inside, not as someone's helpless mother, but as Margaret Hale, owner of my home, my voice, and my life.